Struggling black farmer rescues a 60-year-old woman unaware she's a billionaire's mother. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on Elijah Carter's small produce stand. Heat waves rose from the asphalt of the county highway, distorting the view of cars that occasionally whizzed past without slowing. It had been this way for hours now, just the sound of cicadas, the distant rumble of engines, and the quiet ticking of Elijah's ancient pocket watch as it marked another day of disappointing sales. "Not one customer since 11, Elijah muttered, wiping sweat from his brow with a faded handkerchief. He glanced at his display of vegetables, tomatoes starting to soften in the heat, collard greens wilting at the edges, and bell peppers losing their shine. Another day of produce that would likely end up as compost rather than income. At 47, Elijah's face carried the weathered lines of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. His strong hands, once steady and sure when he was younger, now showed slight tremors when he was tired, like today. The farm had been in the Carter family for 3 generations, passed down from his grandfather who had acquired it in 1937 when many thought it impossible for a black man to own land in this part of the country. That legacy weighed heavily on Elijah's shoulders as he stared at the foreclosure notice that had arrived in yesterday's mail. 90 days, he whispered, folding the paper and tucking it back into his overall pocket. He'd already tried everything: bank loans, community fundraisers, even calling in favors from friends who'd moved to the city. The drought had decimated last season's crop, and rising costs had eaten through his meager savings. His wife Marie had been gone 5 years now, taken by cancer that moved too fast for doctors to catch in time. Their only son had left for college in California 3 years ago and rarely called, too busy building a new life to look back. Elijah began to pack away the least viable produce. No point letting it sit in the heat any longer. He'd have to throw out nearly a third of what he'd brought today, another loss he couldn't afford. As he carefully arranged the remaining vegetables into smaller, more appealing displays, he spotted a distant figure stumbling along the highway's shoulder, wavering like a mirage in the heat. At first, he thought it might be a teenager from the nearby reservation. Sometimes they cut across his backfield to reach the convenience store 5 miles down. But as the figure drew closer, Elijah realized it was an elderly white woman. Her silver hair caught the sunlight, and her gait was unsteady as she made her way toward the stand. Something wasn't right. She wore what had once been an expensive dress, now dusty and torn at the hem. Most shocking of all, she was barefoot on the scorching pavement, seemingly oblivious to the burning asphalt. "Ma'am?" Elijah called out, stepping from beneath his canopy. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The woman looked up, her blue eyes cloudy with confusion. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was an unmistakable elegance about her, perfect posture, delicate features, and hands that had never known hard labor. "I seem to have lost my way," she said, her voice cultured but trembling. "Could you tell me where I am?" "You're just outside of Cottonwood Creek," Elijah replied, guiding her into the shade. "My name's Elijah Carter. This is my farm stand. Would you like some water?" The woman accepted the bottle he offered, drinking deeply. "Thank you. She paused, a flash of fear crossing her face. "I can't seem to remember my name. Isn't that strange?" Alarm bells rang in Elijah's mind. Elderly, confused, out in this heat, she could be suffering from heat stroke, or worse. He eased her onto his folding chair. "Do you know how you got here? Did you come from one of the houses up the road?" She shook her head slowly. "I was walking, for such a long time. I was in a garden with roses. Then I was on a road." Her hands trembled as she clutched the water bottle. "I'm very hungry." Without hesitation, Elijah cut a thick slice of watermelon from the small cooler he kept under the stand. "Here, this will help cool you down and get some sugar in your system." As she ate, he noticed a small leather purse still hanging from her wrist. "Ma'am, would you mind if I checked your purse? Might be some ID in there that could help us figure out who to call." She nodded absently, still focused on the watermelon. The purse contained an elegant handkerchief with the monogram, EP, a tube of expensive lipstick, and about $60 in cash. No wallet, no ID, no phone. Elijah reached for his cell phone, but the battery had died hours ago in the heat. The nearest house was his own, about a half-mile down his private drive. The woman clearly couldn't walk much farther, and he couldn't leave her alone at the stand in this condition. "Listen," he said gently. "I'm going to close up early today. My house isn't far. You can rest there while I make some calls, try to find out where you belong." Something flickered in her eyes, fear or perhaps relief. "You're very kind. Most people wouldn't bother with an old woman these days. My mama taught me better than that," Elijah said simply, already packing up his remaining produce. As he loaded the last crate into his old pickup truck, a feeling of unease settled over him. Taking a stranger home went against every cautious bone in his body. Yet leaving her here wasn't an option. Sometimes doing the right thing meant taking a risk. "I don't have much," he told her as he helped her into the passenger seat. "But you're welcome to what I have until we figure this out." What Elijah couldn't know was that this simple act of kindness, offering shelter to a confused stranger on a brutally hot day, was about to change everything. The woman now sitting in his truck wasn't just any lost elderly person. And the ripples from this encounter would soon reach far beyond his struggling farm, all the way to the gleaming towers of a tech empire, and the cold heart of a billionaire who had forgotten the meaning of compassion. Elijah's farmhouse stood as a testament to both pride and hardship, a two-story white clapboard structure with a sagging porch and meticulous flower beds. The contrast wasn't lost on the elderly woman as she gazed up at it from the truck. "Beautiful hydrangeas," she murmured. "Someone tends them with love." "That was Marie's doing," Elijah replied, surprised. "Most people notice the peeling paint first. My late wife. I keep them going for her." Inside, the house was clean but sparse. Photographs on the walls told the story of a family once whole, Elijah younger and beaming beside a beautiful woman, a small boy growing progressively older through the frames until the images stopped around high school graduation. The woman settled onto the worn sofa while Elijah made calls. First to Sheriff Michaels, an honest man Elijah had known since childhood, then to the 3 senior living facilities within 30 miles. No one reported a missing resident matching her description. "Looks like you'll be staying the night," Elijah said, setting down a mug of tea. "Sheriff's coming by in the morning. Says to keep you comfortable till then." She cradled the mug between delicate hands. "I feel like such a burden." "Not at all," Elijah assured her, though his mind raced with practical concerns. Another mouth to feed wasn't ideal with his finances stretched thin already. After a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, Elijah showed her to the guest room, once his son's. As he turned to leave, she suddenly grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "There was a garden," she whispered intensely. "High up. I could see the entire city. Roses and silver planters." Her eyes grew distant. A man was shouting. Something about shareholders. "It's okay," Elijah said gently. "Don't strain yourself. Memory's funny that way, comes back in pieces." Later that night, unable to sleep, Elijah found her in the kitchen, staring out the window at his fields bathed in moonlight. "Your irrigation system wastes about 30% of your water," she said without turning around, her voice suddenly precise and analytical. "That's why the northwest corner of your field failed first during the drought." Elijah froze in the doorway. "How could you know that?" She blinked, looking momentarily confused by her own words. I'm not sure. It just seems obvious from the layout." She turned to him fully. "Water management was always important." The next morning brought new surprises. Sheriff Michaels arrived with his deputy, taking notes as the woman struggled to recall details about herself. "EP," the sheriff mused, examining the monogrammed handkerchief. "Could that be your initials?" "Elizabeth?" She tried the name. "Elaine?" "Neither feels right." After the sheriff left, promising to widen the search, Elijah found himself with a strange companion as he worked the farm. Despite her age, she followed him doggedly, asking questions about his operations. "You're selling directly to individual customers," she observed as he sorted tomatoes for the next day's stand. That's the lowest profit margin in the supply chain. Not much choice for small farms these days, Elijah replied. Nonsense. Farm-to-table restaurants would pay premium for your heirloom varieties. And those specialty grocery stores in the city, what are they called? The ones where people overpay for organic produce. Elijah glanced up sharply. For someone who can't remember her name, you know an awful lot about agricultural economics. A flash of something, fear? Amusement, crossed her face. Perhaps I worked in the industry. Perhaps, Elijah agreed, though he noted her soft hands had never seen hard labor. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies emerge, she absently twisted an invisible ring on her left finger. I was married, she said suddenly. He gave me a silver necklace with a small diamond pendant for our anniversary. Her voice caught. He's been gone a long time. I'm sorry, Elijah said softly. I have a son, she continued, her voice stronger. He's always so busy. Important meetings, people hanging on his every word. Pride and sadness mingled in her expression. He built something enormous from nothing. I just wish. Wish what? Elijah prompted when she fell silent. I wish he remembered that nothing is more important than people. She looked at Elijah directly. Your son, in the photos, where is he? California. Software engineering, Elijah answered, surprised by the sudden shift. We don't talk much these days. That's the tragedy of success, she murmured. It takes our children away from us. My Landon was so different before. She gasped suddenly, pressing her hands to her mouth. Landon, Elijah repeated. Is that your son's name? The woman's eyes widened with a mixture of triumph and fear. Yes. His name is Landon. Landon Pierce. The name tickled something in Elijah's memory, something he'd seen in a magazine or newspaper. But before he could pursue the thought, the woman swayed, overcome with emotion or exhaustion. Why don't you rest? He suggested, helping her stand. We've made progress today. As Elijah settled in later that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that the confused woman sleeping in his guest room was not who she appeared to be. Something about her manner, her knowledge, hinted at a life far removed from his simple farm. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd do some digging of his own. What he couldn't know was that at that very moment, less than 200 miles away, a sleek office tower still blazed with lights as Landon Pierce orchestrated a search that would soon collide with Elijah's quiet world. The 47th floor of the Pierce Technologies headquarters pulsed with tense energy even at midnight. Behind a wall of glass overlooking the city skyline, Landon Pierce paced like a caged predator, his Italian shoes silent on the plush carpet. At 38, he wore his success in every detail: the precision-tailored suit, the titanium watch worth more than most cars, the permanent furrow between his brows from years of scrutinizing spreadsheets and crushing competitors. 3 days, he snapped into the conference call speaker. My mother has been missing for 3 days, and your so-called premium care facility didn't notice for 12 hours? On the screen, the director of Tranquility Gardens Eldercare fidgeted nervously. Mr. Pierce, your mother was always given the independence she requested. The staff respected her privacy during her garden time and... Independence? Landon's voice cut like steel. She's 72 with early-stage dementia. She pays your facility 7 figures annually for supervision. Landon ended the call with a jab at the touchscreen, then turned to the 3 people seated at the conference table: his chief of security, his personal attorney, and his head of public relations. Options, he demanded simply. Victoria Chin, his PR director, spoke first. We need to control the narrative. Eleanor Pierce taking personal retreat time for wellness is our cover story. I've already called our media contacts to suppress any missing persons reports. Landon nodded approvingly. The Pierce name adorned buildings, endowed university chairs, and headed a foundation that doled out millions in strategic philanthropy. No hint of scandal or family dysfunction could be permitted to tarnish it. The private investigators have covered most of the upscale areas, reported Malcolm Reed, the ex-military head of security. We're expanding the search radius to smaller towns within driving distance of Tranquility Gardens. What about police involvement? Landon asked, though his tone suggested he already knew his preferred answer. Howard Weiss, the silver-haired attorney who'd guided the Pierce family through 3 decades of wealth accumulation, cleared his throat. Legally speaking, we should have reported her missing immediately. However, given Ms. Pierce's status and your concern about media attention, I've spoken with certain contacts at the state level. They'll give us another 48 hours before making it official. Landon nodded again, turning to stare out at the cityscape, a kingdom he'd built from a single revolutionary algorithm written in his college dorm. People called him brilliant, ruthless, visionary. Few remembered that Eleanor Pierce had remortgaged her modest home to fund his first startup after his father's death. A soft ping from his phone interrupted his thoughts. Malcolm had forwarded an email from one of the private investigators. "They've found something," Landon announced, scanning the message. A local Facebook community page from some rural county posted about an elderly woman being helped by a farmer 2 days ago. Victoria moved to his side. "Unlikely to be her. Eleanor Pierce wouldn't be caught in, what is this place, Cottonwood Creek?" "Check anyway," Landon ordered. "Send Phillips with a photo. And for God's sake, keep it quiet." After the team dispersed, Landon unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk and withdrew a silver-framed photograph, Eleanor, and himself at his university graduation. She was beaming with undisguised pride, her arm linked through his. He was already on his phone, closing his first major investment deal. When had things changed? When had their weekly dinners become monthly phone calls, then quarterly visits, then delegated to his assistant who scheduled perfunctory holiday appearances? When had his brilliant, vivacious mother become an obligation to be managed rather than a person to be cherished? "We're going to find you, Mom," he whispered to the photograph. But a small voice in his mind added, "And then what? Back to Tranquility Gardens where you can be properly contained? Back to the life you clearly tried to escape?" Across the state, in the farmhouse kitchen, Elijah sat at his laptop, slowly typing Landon Pierce into a search engine. The results made him nearly spill his coffee. Landon Pierce, tech billionaire, expands empire with new quantum computing division. Landon Pierce named among world's 50 most influential business leaders. Pierce Technologies stock soars after revolutionary AI announcement. And there, in an article about a charity gala from last year, a photograph of Landon Pierce standing beside an elegant older woman with silver hair. The caption read, "Tech mogul Landon Pierce with Mother and Pierce Foundation co-chair Eleanor Pierce at annual fundraiser." Elijah stared at the image, his heart pounding. The woman in the photograph, though polished and bejeweled, was unmistakably his houseguest, now asleep upstairs in his son's old bedroom. "Eleanor Pierce," he whispered, testing the name. The mystery of her monogrammed handkerchief, EP, suddenly made sense. He clicked further, reading about the Pierce family wealth, their influence, their power. What was this woman doing wandering barefoot along a country highway? Why hadn't her disappearance made headlines? Most importantly, what would happen when her billionaire son discovered she was staying with a struggling farmer on the verge of foreclosure? A floorboard creaked behind him. Elijah quickly closed the laptop and turned to find Eleanor. He couldn't think of her as anything else now, standing in the doorway. "I remembered something else," she said softly. "I remember running away." Before Elijah could respond, headlights swept across the kitchen window as a vehicle turned into his long driveway. The clock on the wall read 11:37 p.m., far too late for casual visitors. "Are you expecting someone?" Eleanor asked, her voice suddenly sharp with fear. "No," Elijah replied, moving to the window. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows was making its way toward the house, looking entirely out of place on his humble farm. The billionaire's search had found them. Dawn broke over Elijah's farm with an unusual flurry of activity. After the late-night visitors, who turned out to be private investigators, confirmed Eleanor's identity, they insisted on returning with Landon Pierce himself. Eleanor had firmly refused to leave with them, claiming she needed rest before facing her son. "I want to meet him at your farm stand," she told Elijah as they sipped coffee on the porch. Not here. Neutral ground. Elijah studied her face, noting the clarity that had returned to her eyes. You're afraid of him? Not afraid, Eleanor corrected. Disappointed. And not ready to be whisked away as though I've committed some crime. She reached for his hand. You've shown me more genuine care in 3 days than my son has in 3 years. By 9 o'clock, they were at the roadside stand. Eleanor had insisted on helping arrange the produce, her hands moving with surprising efficiency for someone who had likely never worked a day of manual labor in her life. There's dignity in growing things, she remarked, polishing an apple to a high shine. Landon used to understand that before dollars became his only measure of worth. The rumble of powerful engines interrupted the peaceful morning. 3 black vehicles approached, the lead SUV worth more than Elijah's entire farm. They pulled to a stop in a choreographed formation, kicking up dust that settled on the freshly arranged produce. Landon Pierce emerged first, his tailored suit incongruous against the rural backdrop. He was taller than he appeared in photographs, with Eleanor's sharp blue eyes and a jawline set hard with determination. 2 security men flanked him, their postures suggesting they were prepared for trouble. Mother, Landon called, striding forward. His voice carried the practiced authority of a man accustomed to commanding rooms full of executives. Eleanor straightened her shoulders but didn't move from behind the humble wooden stand. Hello, Landon. Landon's eyes flickered to Elijah, assessing him with the cold calculation of someone determining a threat level. You've put us through quite an ordeal. The facility has been in chaos. My entire security team has been diverted. His tone was more appropriate for addressing a wayward child than a parent. How inconsiderate of me to disrupt your corporate calendar by exercising my free will, Eleanor replied with surprising steel in her voice. Landon's jaw tightened. He turned to Elijah. I don't know what your angle is here, but keeping a vulnerable woman with dementia. I don't have dementia, Eleanor cut in sharply. I had 2 episodes of memory lapse. The doctors said it could be stress-related. You were the one who insisted on that facility. You wander off, forget who you are, and end up barefoot on some highway, Landon countered. What would you call it? Elijah stepped forward. Mr. Pierce, your mother has been perfectly lucid. Stay out of this, Landon snapped. I looked you up, Elijah Carter. Farm on the verge of foreclosure. Convenient that you found one of the wealthiest women in the state, isn't it? The accusation hung in the air like a thundercloud. One of the security men moved his hand inside his jacket. Landon Alexander Pierce. Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. The full use of his name had an immediate effect. Landon actually flinched. How dare you imply this man took advantage of me? He fed me when I was hungry, sheltered me when I was lost, and not once, did he ask who I was or what I was worth. Mother, you can't possibly. I'm not finished, she continued, moving from behind the stand to confront her son directly. Despite being a head shorter, she seemed to tower over him in that moment. Elijah called the sheriff. He contacted senior living facilities. He was trying to find my family while treating me with dignity. Landon's expression wavered between disbelief and something that might have been shame. When was the last time you asked what I wanted, Landon? Not what was convenient for you or good for the Pierce image, but what would make me happy. Eleanor's voice softened. I spent 20 years after your father died building you up, supporting your dreams. Then when you made it, you tucked me away in that beautiful prison with its manicured gardens and staff that treats me like I'm made of glass. The security men looked uncomfortable. Even Landon seemed at a loss for words. Elijah quietly began rearranging the tomatoes that had been disturbed by the dust, giving mother and son some semblance of privacy despite the open setting. You ran away, Landon finally said, his voice stripped of its executive authority. Do you have any idea how worried I was? Were you worried about me, or worried about the scandal? Eleanor challenged. The question hit its mark. Landon's gaze dropped to the ground, then shifted to Elijah. Something changed in his expression, a reassessment. Mr. Carter, he said, his tone carefully neutral, Thank you for looking after my mother. I'm prepared to compensate you for your trouble. Before Elijah could respond, Eleanor stepped between them. He doesn't want your money, Landon. And I'm not leaving with you today. This declaration clearly shocked everyone present, Landon, his security team, and especially Elijah. What are you saying? Landon demanded. I'm saying I need time. I'm saying I've found something here that I've been missing. Eleanor's expression softened as she looked at the simple farm stand. I'm saying that for the first time in years, I feel useful instead of decorative. A phone rang. One of the security men answered, then approached Landon with urgency. Sir, the press somehow got wind of this. They're asking for statements about your mother's rural sabbatical, as they're calling it. Landon's face hardened momentarily, then relaxed into a resigned smile. It seems we have a situation, Mother. Yes, Eleanor agreed. We certainly do. The morning sun illuminated the unlikely tableau: a billionaire tech mogul, his determined mother, and a struggling farmer, 3 lives that had collided by chance, now inextricably connected in ways none of them could have imagined. The compromise surprised everyone. Eleanor would stay in Cottonwood Creek, not at Elijah's farmhouse, but at the town's only bed and breakfast. Landon would return to the city but come back for Sunday dinners. The press was fed a story about Eleanor Pierce's hands-on research for the Pierce Foundation's new rural investment initiative. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Eleanor sat at Elijah's kitchen table surrounded by papers, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Your irrigation system is prehistoric, she declared, tapping a diagram with her pen. No wonder you're losing crops during drought years. Elijah sighed, running a hand over his face. I know what needs fixing. What I don't have is capital. Capital, Eleanor repeated thoughtfully. Interesting word choice for a farmer. I did go to college, Elijah reminded her with a hint of defensiveness. Just couldn't afford to finish. Eleanor studied him with newfound respect. Tell me, if money weren't an issue, what would you do with this place? The question seemed cruel given his circumstances, but something in Eleanor's expression encouraged honesty. Drip irrigation. Cold storage facility. Maybe even a greenhouse for year-round growing. The words tumbled out, dreams long buried. Hire local kids as summer help. Start a weekend market right here instead of that sad little roadside stand. Eleanor wrote rapidly in her elegant script. Keep going. Why? So I can torture myself with what I'll never have. Humor an old woman, she insisted. By the time Landon's car pulled up for their scheduled dinner, Eleanor had filled a notebook with Elijah's reluctantly shared vision. Dinner was still awkward, Landon too stiff, Eleanor too pointed in her comments, Elijah uncomfortable with hosting a billionaire at his humble table. Yet something had shifted. When Landon mentioned a supply chain difficulty his company was facing, Elijah offered a perspective that made the tech mogul pause. That's actually quite insightful, Landon admitted, looking at Elijah with new eyes. Farmers understand supply chains better than most MBAs, Eleanor remarked. They just use different vocabulary. After dessert, Eleanor slid her notebook across to her son. Read this. Landon flipped through the pages, his expression unreadable. What exactly are you showing me? A sound investment opportunity, Eleanor replied. The Carter farm could be a model for sustainable agriculture with the right backing. Elijah stood abruptly. I don't need charity. Not charity, Eleanor corrected. Partnership. The Pierce Foundation invests in promising ventures all the time. Mother, Landon began cautiously. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, our foundation focuses on technology and education initiatives, not food? Eleanor interrupted. Not the most fundamental technology humanity has ever developed? Not education about where our sustenance comes from. She fixed her son with a challenging stare. When did you become so narrow-minded, Landon? Instead of bristling as he once might have, Landon looked thoughtful. Let me review your proposal properly. The next morning, Elijah found Eleanor at his farm stand, deep in conversation with a smartly dressed woman who turned out to be the head buyer for Freshfields, an upscale organic grocery chain. "Eleanor, what have you done?" Elijah whispered as the buyer inspected his tomatoes with obvious approval. "Called in a favor," Eleanor replied innocently. "Did I mention I sit on several boards? Connections are capital too, my friend." By the end of the month, Elijah had his first wholesale contract. By the end of the second month, 3 more had followed, along with a feature in a farm-to-table magazine that brought customers from neighboring counties. The foreclosure notice gathered dust in a drawer as the farm began to generate actual profit for the first time in years. Eleanor split her time between the B&B and making calls to old contacts who suddenly discovered an interest in supporting local agriculture. Landon's Sunday visits gradually relaxed into genuine connection. One particular evening, after watching his mother and Elijah joke easily about crop rotation, he lingered after she'd gone to bed. "I've been thinking about your cold storage facility," Landon said, studying the moon through the kitchen window. "I know someone developing technology that could reduce energy costs by 30%. Elijah looked up from his ledger, surprised. "Your foundation considering it?" "No," Landon replied, turning to face him. "This would be a personal investment. No foundation, no corporate involvement, no PR angle." He hesitated. "Just me." "Why?" Elijah asked plainly. Landon's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing something vulnerable beneath. "Because my mother smiles here. Because she's right about me becoming narrow-minded." He set down his glass. "And because you didn't see dollar signs when you found a confused old woman on the side of the road. You just saw a person who needed help." The simple truth hung between them, an acknowledgement that something fundamental was changing for both men. A week later, construction began on the new irrigation system. The following month, ground was broken for the cold storage facility. Elijah hired his first 2 employees, teenagers from the reservation who showed genuine interest in sustainable farming techniques. Eleanor, meanwhile, moved from the B&B into a small cottage on the edge of Elijah's property, close enough to remain involved but distant enough to maintain independence. Her cognitive episodes had completely vanished, supporting her insistence that they'd been stress-related all along. One afternoon, as golden light bathed the improving farm, Landon made an unexpected midweek appearance. He found his mother and Elijah testing soil samples near the greenhouse foundation. "I've been thinking," he announced without preamble. "The elder care facilities in our network are all failing in the same way Tranquility Gardens failed you. I'd like your help redesigning them." Eleanor straightened slowly, soil still clinging to her fingers. "Are you asking for my professional input, or my personal experience?" "Both," Landon admitted. "I've been wrong about a lot of things, Mother." Elijah tactfully moved away to give them privacy, but not before catching the glimmer of tears in Eleanor's eyes, not tears of sadness, but of something that looked remarkably like hope. 1 year later, the transformation of Carter Farm was nothing short of remarkable. Where once stood a simple roadside stand now sprawled the Legacy Market, a vibrant farmers' market hosting 20 local vendors every weekend. The once fallow fields flourished with carefully planned crop rotations, the new irrigation system gleaming in the morning sun. The cold storage facility, built with cutting-edge technology, allowed Elijah to extend his selling season and reduce waste by nearly 60%. Today was special. Crowds gathered beneath a banner reading, "Grand Opening, Legacy Market Community Center." Children darted between stands selling everything from organic vegetables to handcrafted pottery. Local musicians played on a small stage while families spread picnic blankets on newly sodded grass. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sheriff Michaels commented, accepting a cup of lemonade from one of Elijah's teenage employees. "This place was one bad season away from bank ownership last year." Elijah nodded, surveying the scene with quiet pride. His gaze found Eleanor across the market, elegant as ever but now sporting practical gardening clogs beneath her expensive slacks as she explained heirloom tomato varieties to a group of culinary students. Her cottage had become a regular stop for visiting agricultural experts and sustainability advocates, many initially drawn by her famous name, but returning for her surprising knowledge and genuine passion. Places like this need to exist, Elijah replied. Gives folks somewhere to connect with their food and each other. A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd as a line of vehicles approached. Unlike last year's black SUVs, today Landon Pierce arrived in an electric pickup truck, dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt. He was accompanied not by security personnel but by representatives from 5 other rural communities where the Pierce Foundation was establishing similar market initiatives. The media had come too, not for scandal but to cover what business magazines were calling the Pierce pivot, the billionaire's surprising shift toward rural investment and elder-focused community building. The change had initially confused Wall Street but was proving remarkably successful, both financially and in terms of public goodwill. At precisely noon, Eleanor stepped onto the small stage, her silver hair catching the sunlight. The crowd quieted. 1 year ago, I got lost, she began, her clear voice carrying across the market grounds. Lost in more ways than one. I was a woman with wealth and status but no purpose, no real connection. She gestured to the thriving marketplace. What you see today began with a simple act of kindness from a man who had every reason to look the other way. Elijah shifted uncomfortably under the attention as Eleanor continued. The legacy market isn't just about selling vegetables. It's about preserving something precious. The knowledge of growing things, the dignity of labor, the value of community over convenience. She lifted a large pair of ceremonial scissors. I invite Elijah Carter and my son Landon to join me for this ribbon cutting, because today represents what can happen when unlikely partnerships form. As the 3 stood together on stage, the farmer, the elderly woman, and the billionaire, no one would have guessed the tension that had marked their first meeting. The ribbon fell away beneath Eleanor's scissors, and applause erupted across the market. Later, as the celebration continued, Elijah found a quiet moment with Landon near the new greenhouse. Your mother's happier than I've ever seen her, Elijah observed. Landon nodded. She's herself again, the woman who taught me to dream big before I learned to value the wrong things. He gestured toward the community center where Eleanor was now teaching children how to plant sunflower seeds in small pots. The elder care initiative she's heading has completely transformed our facilities. Residents are gardening, mentoring youth, sharing their knowledge instead of just existing. And you? Elijah asked directly. All this agricultural investment can't be what your board expected. A smile, genuine, not the practiced one from corporate photographs, spread across Landon's face. The financials actually speak for themselves. Turns out investing in essential human needs yields consistent returns. He paused. But that's not why I'm continuing it. No, Landon confirmed. I'm doing it because when I visit those communities, people look me in the eye. They don't see Pierce Technologies or my net worth. They just see a person who's helping make their lives better. He shook his head in wonder. Took nearly losing my mother to understand what she tried to tell me for years. From the community center doorway, Eleanor watched her son and Elijah talking, satisfaction warming her heart. Her phone buzzed. Elijah's son was finally coming home for a visit next week, partly curious about the farm's transformation and partly responding to the letters she'd encouraged Elijah to write, rebuilding that bridge one word at a time. As the afternoon sun began its descent, Eleanor made her way to the original farm stand, preserved at her insistence as a reminder of beginnings. She ran her fingers along the weathered wood, remembering how she'd arrived, confused, barefoot, afraid. The woman she'd been then seen from another lifetime. A family approached the stand where Elijah had now joined her, their young daughter pointing excitedly at the heritage apples on display. Is it true you got lost and Mr. Carter found you? The girl asked Eleanor with childlike directness. That's what my mom says. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Elijah, both of them smiling at the simplification of their complex story. In a way, Eleanor replied, handing the child a perfect apple. But sometimes getting lost is how we find where we're supposed to be. Around them, the legacy market hummed with life, a testament to how an act of kindness on a desperate day had blossomed into something neither of them could have imagined, changing not just their lives but an entire community. Some called it luck. Some called it destiny. Elijah and Eleanor simply called it a second chance.